Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Fahmid Islam with you. Before moving on, let's look at today's top stories. Congress passes tougher North Korea sanctions, sends bill to Obama. Young blacks more open to Bernie Sanders' White House bid. Pope meets Russian Orthodox head after 962 years. Rwanda to relocate Burundian refugees after warnings. And Syria, Russian PM warns of world war if troops sent in. Well, those were the headlines, now the details. The U.S. House of Representatives overwhelmingly passed legislation on Friday broadening sanctions to punish North Korea for its nuclear program. Human rights record in cyber crimes and sent the measure to President Barack Obama to sign into law. Lawmakers said they wanted to make Washington's resolve clear to Pyongyang, but also to the United Nations and other governments, especially China, North Korea's lone major ally and main business partner. The package includes sanctions targeting North Korea and secondary sanctions against those who do business with it. The vote was 408-2, following a 96-0 vote in the Senate on Wednesday. Impatient with what they see as Obama's failure to respond to North Korean provocations, many of his fellow Democrats as well as the Republicans who control Congress have been clamoring for a clampdown since Pyongyang tested a nuclear device in January. If Democratic hopeful Bernie Sanders has a chance of drawing African-American voters away from rival Hillary Clinton in South Carolina's presidential nominating contest on February 27, his best opportunity will be among the young. African-Americans support former Secretary of State Clinton by more than a 3-1 margin nationwide. But among young blacks 18 to 29 years old, that margin shrinks to 46% for Clinton versus 33% for Sanders. African Americans overwhelmingly backed Democrats, but opinion polls in the run-up to the November 8th presidential election show younger blacks more apt to reject an establishment candidate. They seem less inclined than their parents to reward Clinton for the outreach of her husband, former President Bill Clinton, and more drawn to Sanders' outspoken views on reducing income inequality, cracking down on Wall Street, and cutting the cost of college. Charged reconciliation and the welfare of Christians in Middle East and Africa on agenda during historic talks held in Cuba. Pope Francis has met with Patriarch Kirill in Cuba in the first ever papal meeting with the head of the Russian Orthodox Church in nearly 1,000 years. Finally, Francis exclaimed as he embraced Kirill in the small wood-paneled VIP room of Havana's airport, where the 3 hours encounter was taking place on Friday. "We are brothers," Francis added. The two church leaders kissed one another 3 times on the cheek, and Kirill told the Pope through an interpreter. "Now things are easier." Media reporting from Havana's airport said the meeting was seen as a step toward healing the almost 1,000 years old rift between the two churches. She said that friends who was en route to Mexico rearranged his schedule to attend the meeting with Kirill, who was already visiting Cuba. Cuba is a neutral ground, if you will. It has nothing to do with the difficult history between the two churches, and President Raul Castro did play a hand in making this happen, Ghanem said. Decision comes as Kigali faces accusations of involvement in destabilizing activities in crisis-hit Burundi. Rwanda's government has said it plans to relocate Burundian refugees to other countries after being accused of involvement in destabilizing activities in its crisis-hit neighboring country. Rwandan Foreign Minister Louise Mushikiwabo said in a statement on Friday that her government would immediately begin working with partners in the international community to plan the orderly and safe relocation of Burundian refugees to third countries. The refugee exodus is troubling. It also exposes refugees to increased threats from forces at home and compromises lasting political solutions, Mushikiwabo said. Dmitry Medvedev says proposal to send Arab ground forces to fight ISIL draws everyone into war. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has warned that the deployment of foreign ground troops in the Syrian conflict could result in a world war. Medvedev was quoted as saying in an interview published late on Thursday by the German newspaper Handelsblatt that a ground operation draws everyone taking part in it into a war. When asked about a recent proposal from Saudi Arabia to send in ground troops to Syria, the Russian Prime Minister answered that the Americans and our Arab partners must consider whether or not they want a permanent war. Media reporting from Moscow says Medvedev's comments were an explicit warning to the United States and its regional allies, including Saudi Arabia. We'll take a short... Indian police arrest student leader on sedition charges. France to evict 1,000 refugees from Calais jungle camp. Pakistan foils plot to free Daniel Pearl's killer. Mexico prepares to host Pope Francis. And the rise and rise of Mrs. Donald Trump. Welcome back to Millennium TV News. Crackdown on dissent cited in detention of New Delhi student for his alleged role in anti-India protests. Police in New Delhi have arrested a student leader from one of India's leading universities on sedition charges. Kanhaiya Kumar, president of Jawaharlal Nehru University Students' Union, was arrested by the police on Friday afternoon for his alleged role in anti-India protests, according to local news reports, which were later confirmed by a media source at the university. Earlier on Friday, thousands of pro-government protesters had marched in New Delhi, calling for the arrest of Kumar and his allies. Top official announces plan to move out those who live in tents and give Calais an image that isn't dignified. Some 1,000 refugees living in the jungle camp in Calais must leave their makeshift dwellings, the top official in France's northern Pas-de-Calais region has announced. Prefect Fabienne Bouquet said on Friday that the plan to move out those taking shelter in tents and shacks concerned about half the surface of the camp. It's time to tell the migrants of Calais who live in undignified conditions and give Calais an image that isn't dignified either, that we have a solution for each of you, she said. Bouquet said her agents will explain to refugees what we expect of them to choose to live in heated containers set up last month on the edge of the camp that can hold 1,500 people or agree to be sent to centers around France. They will be given a week to make the choice. State authorities will visit on Monday to advise those affected that they must leave. Brazen Hyderabad jailbreak plan halted by intelligence agents with arrest of 97 hardcore terrorists, military of Pakistan says. Pakistani intelligence agents arrested 97 people, including 3 commanders, who planned a prison break aimed at freeing the killer of U.S. journalist Daniel Pearl. Army spokesman Lieutenant General Asim Salim Bajwa said in a conference in Karachi on Friday that 3 armed groups, Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi and the Pakistan Taliban, were working together on the plot to free British-born Ahmed Omar Syed Sheikh, currently on death row for the 2002 murder of Pearl. A deputy leader of Al-Qaeda in the subcontinent named Musana was mastermind of the plan and was arranging all the finances while he was aided by the deputy chief of Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Naim Bukhari, Bajwa said. These arrests were made over a period of time, starting from the first arrest made a few months ago. The suspects had been involved in several attacks in the southern port city of Karachi and elsewhere and planned to kill 35 to 40 hostages and break about 100 inmates out of a prison, he added. Mexico City's Zocalo Square shuts down to prepare for Pope Francis's visit to the historic center of the Mexican capital, while the Pope dons a sombrero ahead of his arrival. Final preparations are underway in Mexico City's Zocalo Square on ahead of Pope Francis's visit to the country, with many faithful hoping the pontiff's words of hope will spark change in the drug-ravaged country. During his 5-day visit starting on February 12th, the Pope will walk through the holy door of Mexico City's cathedral. They say that beside every good man is a good woman, and in the case of Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, that woman is Melania, his wife, originally from Slovenia but now possibly heading to the White House as First Lady.
Unbelievable.
She's among the most glamorous candidate spouses ever to hit the campaign trail. 45 years old Melania Trump, third wife of real estate mogul and Republican contender Donald Trump, and potentially America's next First Lady. She has come a long way. Born Melania Navs in Sevenica, Slovenia, she first came to public attention as a fashion model. Photographer Stein Jerko remembers her well. Fashion photographer Stein Jerko, he says, I first met Melania in 1987 when I was leaving a fashion show. Shortly before the show was about to end, I left the hall, and on the staircase outside I saw some girl who struck me as very tall, slim, with long hair, and immediately I thought she had great modeling potential. He turned out to be right. 17 years old Melania's career took off on a path that would take to her to Milan and the United States, where she met Donald Trump at a party in New York in 1998. They were married on January 2005. Stein Jericho says she could, as a Slovenian and now an American, become the first lady with Donald Trump. I have to say I would be very pleased and happy for helping her become what she is by taking those first photos which started her career in fashion modeling. And now with the presidential campaign in full swing, Melania Trump is practicing for what may be her next career, First Lady of the United States. Brazilian troops prepare for public action aimed at educating the population on eliminating the mosquito which carries the Zika virus. It's graduation day in Rio de Janeiro, and these soldiers are now armed with knowledge on how to fight the mosquito carrying the Zika virus. Brazil is mobilizing its troops this weekend to start their public action phase. They'll be going door to door, handing out leaflets and educating the citizens on the dangers of still water. Civilians and members of Islamist fighter groups in Syria have expressed skepticism over major powers' agreement on a cessation of hostilities. They may be celebrating in Europe, but here in the Damascus suburbs, news of the Syrian ceasefire deal is barely registering. They're too busy digging out after another airstrike. It's a deadly reminder that the pause won't take effect for another week. Not only that, but that the pause won't apply to certain groups like Islamic State and the Nusra Front. At a checkpoint in Idlib province, one fighter called the ceasefire meaningless.
You're asking for a ceasefire and classify our brothers in al-Nusra Front and Jund al-Aqsa and other Islamic factions as terrorists. What kind of ceasefire is this?
Demonstrators in Haiti denounce a last-minute deal allowing parliament to choose an interim president after botched elections leaves Haiti with no president. Crowds feel the streets in Haiti are now leaderless country, facing a grim and uncertain future. Former President Michel Martelly left office Sunday with no elected successor after a botched election saw a second round of voting cancelled amid protests. Under an 11th-hour agreement, it was decided that Prime Minister Evans Paul would stay in office until Parliament chooses an interim president. But demonstrators say the agreement left them out and they want to be heard. Former Member of Parliament Arnel Belizar took his message to the streets. Police in Athens fired tear gas as farmers protesting against pension reforms throw stones at the Agricultural Ministry building. Greek police fired tear gas to disperse protesting farmers after they tried to storm the Agriculture Ministry building in central Athens on Friday. The clashes erupted when about 800 farmers from Crete who came to Athens to demonstrate against the government's planned pension reforms asked police to allow them to drive a pickup truck with vegetables in front of the ministry as part of their protest and allow them entrance to the building. When police turned down their demand, enraged farmers attacked them with shepherds' groups and pelted them with vegetables. The scuffles quickly escalated and police fired rounds of tear gas to disperse the protesters who threw stones, smashed windows and set garbage bins on fire. 4 protesters were detained during the clashes, the police officials said. World powers have announced a plan for humanitarian aid and a nationwide ceasefire for Syria, but officials warn the future for the conflict-ridden country remains cloudy. It's not a breakthrough, but it is an important step forward. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says there is to be a ceasefire in Syria. He says,
We believe we have made progress.
We believe that we have made progress on both the humanitarian front and the cessation of hostilities front. The ceasefire deal reached in Munich by Kerry, his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, and many others is expected to come into effect next week. It comes after 5 years of war, more than 250,000 deaths and a refugee crisis that has displaced millions.
Politics is the art of the possible. And I can't look into Staffan de Mistura's mind, or anybody else's mind for that matter.
A memorial service is held for the 93 victims killed in Tainan earthquake. Incense filled the air during a memorial service in Tainan City on Friday for the 93 victims so far known to have died in an earthquake last weekend. Relative, friends and community members paid their respects. President-elect Tsai Ing-wen and outgoing President Ma Ying-jeou were also present. The disaster struck just days before the Lunar New Year holiday, compounding the tragedy for many. Volunteer workers were on hand to help grieving families. "We have to realize the impermanence of things," one volunteer said. "We have to leave the past behind so we can create a beautiful future." Search and recovery efforts continue at the site of the apartment building where a majority of the victims were killed. Police in Columbus, Ohio shot and killed a man after he attacked people with a machete in a restaurant. Police shot and killed a man in Columbus, Ohio, Thursday night after he attacked people in a restaurant with a machete. Police said the man walked into the Nazareth restaurant around 6 p.m. local time and had an argument with an employee. He left but returned a short time later with a machete and began attacking customers. This woman was inside the restaurant while it happened.
Another officer in a cruiser fired a couple shots at him and put him down.
At least 5 people inside the restaurant were hurt, including one person who was in critical condition, officials said. Local media say that person's condition was upgraded after surgery.
The eviction of more than 2,000 people in Myanmar highlights Suu Kyi's challenges as the country's new government. A dusty road across from an industrial complex near Yangon has become home to some 2,500 people after they were evicted from their homes by the military. People like Sander and her family were forced to set up makeshift shelters here and are now afraid they'll be forced out again. "We have to sleep very carefully at night," she cried, "because we are afraid that someone might set fire to our tents."
"We have to sleep very carefully at night," she cries, "because we're afraid that someone might set fire to our tents." They had been living here on what they thought was vacant land for years, but it's actually part of an industrial complex that's owned by the military. Authorities flattened their makeshift homes. Government promises of compensation have so far come to nothing. Rights activists have accused the military and Army-linked enterprises of numerous land grabs in recent years.
New law must be enacted that gives people title to the land that they have lived on for generations. If not, they will be moved and they will end up living on roadsides, in parks, in other open space, which itself will then be pushed on again.
Members of Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, who were recently sworn in as lawmakers, have said that the evictions were timed to avoid opposition from the new government. The NLD party has worked for years to support those who have faced forcible evictions, although it's unclear how they plan to resolve the disputes, given the likely military opposition.
Sea otters get their ice-hurt snacks for the daily build-up to Valentine's Day. The sea otters who live south of Tokyo got more of their special treats as they look to celebrate Valentine's Day. For male sea otter Yutan, living at the Yokohama Hakejima Sea Paradise, it's become a chance to show visitors how much he likes to show off. Yutan has been fed every day by breeding engineer Shizuko Shinozaki, and when asked about visitors' reaction so far, she says it has been good. Sea otters are the only aquarium residents to get their heart-shaped treat before Valentine's Day. Now the businesses news. American and British regulators are likely to charge several banks with rigging interest rates, including Citigroup, the third largest U.S. bank, and London-based HSBC Holdings, the Wall Street Journal reported on Friday. The U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the U.K. Financial Conduct Authority were preparing a final round of civil charges against the banks for rate manipulation in the Labour scandal, the newspaper reported, citing people close to the investigation. The journal said the CFTC was still investigating JP Morgan Chase, the largest American bank by assets, but that may not lead to charges. UK regulators said last year they dropped their probe of JP Morgan. Alphabet Inc. Corporation's Google will not participate in the U.S. Federal Communications Commission's upcoming auction of broadcast airwaves that can help the wireless industry improve coverage, a spokeswoman told media on Friday. Some industry watchers had expected internet search giant Google to be a dark horse participant in the auction. In April last year, the company launched a new U.S. wireless service that switches between Wi-Fi and cellular networks hosted through Sprint Corporation's and T-Mobile US Inc.'s networks. Google last participated in a 2008 FCC auction but did not buy any airwaves. Now the science, technology and environment news. Researchers are developing soft robotic tools for underwater research. The pressure-driven systems will allow marine biologists to examine delicate sea life without harming it. More than 500 feet underwater in the Gulf of Elliott, researchers test new soft robotic creepers designed to collect samples of delicate sea life. Replacing standard metallic creepers, these soft, squishy aquators could be a powerful new tool for biologists studying marine life. Mechanical engineer Kevin Galloway has this example. He says,
give a coral reef a version of a colonoscopy. So there's one of the things that they can't do is they can't go into these tiny little burrows where some of these sea creatures live. They just don't have the instruments that are flexible enough, that are small enough to go in there.
But can something made from soft materials work under the pressure found at depth underwater?
Yes, because all you need is a pressure differential. All the soft robotics that we make are hydraulic or air pressure driven. As long as the pressure inside is greater than the pressure outside, you will get motion.
The memory foam does this really neat thing where as you start to squish it down, it hits a certain pressure. You press a little bit and you get to some pressure. And then as you keep squeezing it down, it doesn't change.
European scientists have given up hope of restoring contact with space probe Philae, which successfully landed on a comet in a pinpoint operation only to lose power because its solar-driven batteries were in the shade. The German Aerospace Center said on Friday it suspects Philae is now covered in dust and too cold to operate. Unfortunately, the probability of Philae reestablishing contact with our team at the DLR Lander Control Center is almost zero, and we will no longer be sending any commands, Stefan Ulamek, Philae project manager of the DLR, said in a statement. Philae came to rest on a comet in November 2014 in what was considered a remarkable feat of precision space travel, but it closed down soon after because it was in the shade and could not be recharged. We'll take a short... New smartphone app has the potential to create a worldwide mobile seismic network to warn users of quakes. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley have unveiled a free Android app that harnesses a smartphone's ability to detect whether its movement is likely caused by an earthquake or by human activities. The MyShake app, launched on Friday, then transmits the data to a processing center where it can be used along with the information from millions of other smartphones to potentially warn users of imminent tremors from nearby quakes. The accelerometers in the smartphones are actually similar to the ones used in seismology, said King Kai Kong, lead researcher at the Seismological Lab at University of California, Berkeley. Even though they are relatively low quality, we thought there is a potential to use them to detect earthquakes. Now the entertainment news. George Clooney said on Friday the refugee crisis is bigger than the headline-grabbing exodus from Syria and Iraq, and he believes Americans will do the right thing by rejecting Donald Trump and calls to ban Muslims entering the United States. Clooney spoke to media on the same day he and his wife, the human rights lawyer Amal Alamuddin Clooney, met German Chancellor Angela Merkel behind closed doors at the Chancellery to discuss the refugee issue. The Clooneys were in the German capital for the international premiere of Hail Caesar, in which Clooney has a starring role and which opened the Berlin International Film Festival on Thursday. For me, the refugee crisis is not just the Syrian refugees, Clooney told Reuters. You know, there are still IDPs and refugees in South Sudan. In Darfur, there's still millions of people and they're still dying. So it's really all over the world. 60 million displaced people right now in the world. It's just a terrible, terrible time for it, he added. Clooney, who was challenged at a press conference on Thursday by questioners who urged him to use his public prominence to do more to help end the refugee crisis, said he is not afraid to speak out on controversial subjects.
There's some sort of extreme voices out there. You know, I always have to caution people when they watch American politics that, you know, we go a little crazy during the political season, and it's a very long season. And, you know, this xenophobic, fascist sort of no Muslims are going to be coming into the United States. That's never going to happen. You know, that's not going to happen in the United States. We're not going to, that's not who we are, and that's not who we've ever been.
The director Jeff Nicholas has a knack for turning his personal life into cinema, and he's done it again in Midnight Special, a sci-fi themed movie about a boy with extraordinary powers inspired by his own son. Starring Michael Shannon, Joel Edgerton, Adam Driver and Kirsten Dunst, the film was shown on Friday at the Berlin Film Festival in competition for the festival's top prize, the Golden Bear. The protagonist is about an 8-year-old boy named Alton who has the power to detect encrypted government data transmissions. Among other things, he also has eyes that can emit laser-type beams, which makes the government think he may be a secret weapon. His father, Roy, and mother, Sarah, have to take extraordinary steps to keep Alton from being captured by the FBI or by a religious cult who believe he is in the Messiah. Nicholas was widely praised for his 2012 feature film Mud, about two boys who befriend a drifter who lives on an otherwise deserted Mississippi River island.
It's okay.
Now the sports news. Major League Baseball on Friday issued a lifetime ban to former New York Mets closer Jerry Murguia after he tested positive a third time for a performance-enhancing substance. Mejia, 26, tested positive for anabolic steroid boldenone. He was in the midst of a 162-game suspension for both boldenone and stanozolol, for which he tested positive while serving his original 80-game ban last summer. The lifetime suspension is the longest drug-related ban MLB has issued. Mejia, who failed 3 tests in less than a year, may apply to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred for reinstatement in 1 year. Former FIFA Secretary General Jerome Valak became the latest high-profile football official to be kicked out of the sport when he was banned for 12 years on Friday after causing considerable financial damage to its scandal-plagued governing body. Valk was found guilty by FIFA ethics judge Hans-Joachim Eckert of misconduct over the sale of World Cup tickets, abuse of travel expenses, attempting to sell TV rights below their market value, and destruction of evidence. Valk acted against FIFA's best interests and caused considerable financial damage to FIFA, while his private and personal interests detracted him from his ability to properly perform his duties as the Secretary General of FIFA. Let's have a look at Millennium TV News recap. Congress passes tougher North Korea sanctions, sends bill to Obama. Young blacks more open to Bernie Sanders' White House bid. Pope meets Russian Orthodox head after 962 years. Rwanda to relocate Burundian refugees after warnings. And Syria, Russian PM warns of world war if troops sent in. You're up to date with our top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thanks for staying with us. Allah Hafiz.